you, and hello you. Yes, You's back. He's lying in the lounge. Anyway, a couple of things. First, I sometimes, occasionally, because I get directed that way, is that of course on the Fat Boy in Croatia's YouTube channel you can't leave any comments. However, on his Twitter account that's not the case, although of course eventually you do get blocked. But recently he did, you know, he's absolutely taking the piss here. He recently did a video about taking on Tony. That's Tony Morris, he must have a little fixation for, and about parental neglect. And of course the comments under that, you know, when it comes about parental neglect for somebody who bolted off to Thailand, which we think happened before Christmas, definitely New Year. Yeah, what a hypocrite. And then he goes on a new one. He's on about some guy called Paul Gillies, and he's got a little screenshot about the independent inquiry into CSA. And of course Lloyd Evans talking about CSA is just it beggars belief, which clearly still with him. He still thinks that he hasn't done anything wrong, and that he isn't compromised. But lots of people under his Twitter postings have reminded him of that fact. Anyhow, that's enough of that fat twat. Anyway, I've recently put up a couple of videos about Adam and Eve and Noah, of course, and there's been like a hell of a lot of comments on them, which I really appreciate them, and a lot of them have been quite interesting, been thought-provoking, and some of them have been even more thought-provoking because I'm thinking, how in the world do you still believe this? A couple of silly ones where people are trying to rationalise the flood by stating that the reason why the animals got to Australia is because maybe God lifted them up from the ark and transported them to Australia. What? Every single animal that lives in Australia, all the ones that are unique to Australia, he transported them from there to the ark, and he took two and then transported them back. For all the time that would have took for all the animals all over the earth, it would have been easier just to individually kill all the evil people on the earth and not bother with that at all and save the drowning of billions. But hey ho. I'm just a man, you know. I'm just a logical thinking man. I'm not God. Obviously, he has wonderful powers of perception and thinking process, way beyond anything I can comprehend. Allegedly, other people put things like it's impossible for God to lie. Well, if God said that, I think that might have been a lie, because there's numerous references where God bigs himself up. I saw something today, called himself the happy God. It was something like Jehovah's followers. Oh, why are Jehovah's followers happy? Because they serve the happy God. Wowee, there's numerous examples in the Old Testament when that is not one of the things that I ever would refer to God as being happy. And slow to anger is another thing that he claims to be as well. The Bible tells you different, and a God of love and mercy, the Bible tells you different. Again, time and time again, within the Bible, there's numerous examples of anything close to being slow to anger, a God of love and mercy, and a happy God. Happy God. So where's ever been happy? You just, I don't know. It's staggering. And this comes back to a few things that people have put on the video, which is they're saying that the stories in the Old Testament especially are allegories, and where they're basically stories that are written down to teach some sort of to explain a moral issue. Now, however, according to the Bible, that all Scripture is inspired of God. which means that therefore that when he inspired Bible writers to write these stories of people and places and events that never actually occurred, that means that it's just works of fiction, which means it sort of goes against anybody saying that God is, he cannot lie, and he's a God of truth, because if you make up a story to tell a story, a moral story, it's not the truth, especially when you present it as fact. So if God told his Bible writers to basically write down these stories that never happened just as an easy way of explaining what sort of guy he was, personally, if I was God, I wouldn't have got people to write down things where I'm put in such a bad light so many times, responsible for the actions of sin, of the death sentence, penalty of sin, of cheating, treating the Adam and Eve so poorly when they're really children in adults' bodies, letting Satan get away with everything. Then, of course, the whole thing about the flood, billions of drowned creatures. I could go on and on and on. If God told Bible writers to write down those stories and they never really existed, why? Because they do not paint him in a favourable light at all. But if they're stories of men trying to understand the God that they were serving, that I understand and I get. However, we have a fundamental problem, because the majority of people out there who are believers in God don't refer to themselves as Godians or Jehovians or Yahwehians. They refer themselves as Christians, because they really, really are drawn to the man Jesus Christ, because he's in completely opposite to his Father, who they're not really particularly drawn to at all. The only thing they like about God is that he sent down his Son, but apparently that's about it. You know, there's that famous saying where people say, you know what, he's nothing like his dad, is he? No, he's not, he's nothing. And this is a fact. That as far as I'm aware, that during the time that Jesus was on the earth, he didn't actually kill anybody. Unlike his Father, who in the Bible itself is literally responsible for the deaths. I'm sure we're in the millions here. I'm sure that Jehovah God is responsible for the death of millions. I did a video, I'm actually going to put this in the description because it's something I don't think many people have thought about. But it's in reference to what happened in the wilderness. Remember, the 12 tribes went out into the promised land and they came back, and only 2 had a favourable report, and they brought back these massive bits of fruit, and naturally the people grew afraid and scared because they came back with rumours of giants. Imagine if you saw this massive fruit, you thought, wow, how big are the people who eat that sort of fruit? And obviously they knew that giants had existed due to stories of the Nephilim and whatsoever, and Goliath. He was a big fella as well, and they naturally grew scared, and of course that's the rumours went through it was about nearly 1 million people, I believe, went through this camp. It got to the point that all of a sudden people started growing really afraid, and Jehovah God, being the God of slow to anger, of love and kindness and mercy, showing those favourable attributes, he actually said to Moses, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put them all to death. I am going to put them all to death, and I will start again with you. And incredibly, Moses had to talk Jehovah God down to, on the spot, kill maybe 1 million people. He had to say to him things like, no, I wouldn't do that, because imagine how your reputation is going to be when the nations surrounding you get to hear that you got your people out of Egypt only to kill them in the wilderness. Remember, you're a God of loving kindness and mercy and slow to anger. He had to try and remind God what sort of God he was allegedly supposed to be. And Moses persuaded God not to react and kill near enough 1 million people straight away. It's incredible. This is a man arguing with God not to kill 1 million people. A God of slow to anger, mercy, kindness, forgiveness, love. It's bizarre. But as it was, I believe it's something like he said, okay, they're going to travel in a circle in the wilderness for 40 years. For 40 years. And anybody over 30 generally died. And most people at that time were living to about 120. So if you put 40 onto 30, you get to 70, which means that most people still have 50 years left of their life. And anybody who was over 70, unless they were special people, never got in. Which means that Jehovah God deliberately ended early the lives and nilling off 1 million people. I'll put in the description, it's worth watching, because not a lot of people actually think about those figures. Certainly I did, because it massively bothered me for a hell of a long time. And when you do the figures, it's absolutely shocking. So this is probably the reason why people warmed to Jesus, because he wasn't responsible for killing so many people. And Jesus actually said you should love your enemies, when Jehovah God was all about killing your enemies on the spot, or just going in and slaughtering everybody, leaving none alive, men, women and children and babies. Just slaughter the lot. You can't imagine Jesus doing that. Everything about Jesus as a man is really, really appealing, which is why Jehovah's Witnesses say, and most Christians say, that we should try and follow and imitate the example of Christ. Follow in his footsteps. Put on the Christ-like personality. It's nothing to do with putting on the Jehovah-like personality, because that's one personality we don't really want to put on. Otherwise, there'd be mass slaughter all the time. So most Christians, I'm sure, would love it if, when it came to the Bible, that they could actually detach the whole of the Old Testament and just have their belief, the worship structure, the whole religious structure based on the New Testament, just on the life of Jesus. But if we think about it, it's such a small book, where you just have, him getting born, that bit where he sodded off and was found in the temple, and then the bit where he presents himself to John the Baptist, his short ministry, his death, and then the bits of the apostles trying to cope without their leader gone, trying to say he did come back from the dead, we should all follow his example, the Mosaic law is done and dusted, and then that really odd bit at the end, the magic mushrooms bit, where we have somebody completely off their tits writing in the book of Revelation. And I'm sure most Christians would just love it if that we could just take remove the Old Testament and Revelation and just say, my faith is firmly based on this book. But unfortunately you can't. It's one book. And Jesus Christ, time and time again, referred back to the Old Testament. As we know, he referred even to the time of the flood. So you can't take one from the other. There's a symbiotic relationship between the New Testament and the Old Testament, between Jesus and the Old Testament, and you can't separate them. So for anybody who was a former Jehovah's Witness, who now still believes they are a Christian, sorry, there has to be this problem of trying to deal with what happened in the Old Testament. Because when you read it, it is truly shocking. And this is where the cognitive dissonance kicks in, because they know these things occurred and Jesus said they did, and they just try to say that, oh, well, maybe they didn't really occur, they're really just allegories, and there was just, no, sorry, you can't do that. It's like anything, for instance, if you've got to write a really, really important letter, and it's to go be presented for, maybe it's for your will, maybe it's your testimony to appear in court, maybe it's just something really important, and you want to make sure that you're accurately understood, and that you want to look like you know what you're talking about, and you don't want anybody to look at your words and realise you've spelt things wrong, or you've misapplied words. You would go to a dictionary. But how would it be if somebody gave you a dictionary and says, there's a dictionary there, and you say, okay, thank you very much, this will be really helpful, and you say, well, just to let you know that 75% of it, the words are spelt incorrectly, and also the meanings are wrong as well. Really? Yeah, you have to take 75% of it, just take it with a massive pinch of salt. Would you be then happy to go in and select words and write them down in your important letter, believing that spelling of that word or that explanation of that word is correct? You wouldn't. So therefore it applies to the Bible. How can you just take what happened in the time of Jesus and say, right, my belief is solely based on the man, Jesus Christ the man, and then ignore everything that come before him? You can't, because the Old Testament deals with about £3,500 of his Father's interaction with his chosen people and the nations about, and it's not very good when you go into it and go, Yeah, it doesn't come out very well here, you know what I mean? You can't, so they dismiss it and go, well, maybe that would never really happen. So what happens? At what point do we go that we go through, go from the fantasy to the fact? Do we go, right, okay, so Adam and Eve and the flood, probably fantasy. Moses, probably fantasy. You know, at what point? Enoch, fantasy. Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, maybes. David, Samuel, perhaps. You know, what point do you crack in and say, right, from this point onwards, I know I'm dealing with real people in real places and real events, but the rest of it, I don't believe in at all. You know what? What happens when you come to Jesus? You know, all the miracles, the walking on the water, for instance. Well, maybe that never happened, but maybe the loaves and fishes did, or maybe it did help to. You know what point? It's all one book. You can't cherry pick your Bible to suit your own belief structure. If you've just gone off on your own and say, right, I'm going to decide on my own what I want to believe. You can't do that. You may as well just go back to, you know, concentrate on Tolkien's work. Tolkien's work is full of different people in different places, you know, there's no proof they existed, but they tell a moral story, and you can actually look at that and say, yeah, I want to live my life like the hobbits, or the elves, or the wizards, apart from the bad one. You know what I mean? Satan, no, not Satan, it's Saruman. You know, it's just nonsense to do that. And the reason why this is important is because people today are looking to the Bible and will base what they will do in their future, how they'll bring up their children, so forth, based on verses in the Bible. And if I remember when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I was quite prepared that if I was in a position whereupon I needed blood to be saved, that I would say, no blood for me, I'd rather die and keep my faith intact. If my son had been seriously injured, I would fight tooth and nail to ensure that he never received a blood transfusion, even accepting that perhaps he would die. This is based on just one scripture, and not in the Old Testament, although it references the Old Testament, something in the New Testament. It is staggering. And so it just shows that you can't just go around cherry picking your bits of Bible, because at the end of the day, some bits you may pick may have a detrimental effect on you personally or your whole family. It really is. It's a massive struggle. So at the end of the days, if you want to have a faith in, if you want to follow the example of Christ, do that. But you could just as well follow the example of Frodo. Put his life on the line time and time again. Or other people that you read about, you could just as well do that. Just say, I want to be like that, or I want to be like Gandalf, or I want to be like, Legolas, or whatever it is. Just old, these are people in old books, although, of course, Lord of the Rings isn't that old. But, you see what I mean? You could go back to people in, that the Greeks believed in, say, I want to follow their example, or some of the Roman gods, or some of the Assyrian gods, or the Egyptian gods. It seems as though for some bizarre reason that we're stuck here in accepting that there's only two real forms of acceptable worship, only two real religious books that really count, is the Bible and the Quran. And they've sort of divvy up the world 50-50. Not exclusively 50-50, but near enough 50-50. And yet if you think about it, probably the only thing Jehovah's Witnesses ever got right is a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. They used to go around with placards saying religion is a snare and a racket, and absolutely bang on the money with that. The thing about it being in a snare is that it does snare you. Religion does snare you, and it keeps it in if you're caught in a trap with your leg, the only way, some Jehovah's Witnesses are bitten off the end of their leg to escape that religion, and then have come out damaged. But then they've gone and stood in another snare, not realising that they've just gone straight into another form of religion based on the Bible, which is another way of just, controlling us. Because if you think about the Bible, it is a book, another video I've done, which is completely misogynistic. It is. If you believe it isn't, you haven't read the Bible. And then you look at the way that the Quran deals with women, and if you've ever been in the company of, and I was in Malaysia, and there were a lot of people, women in the burqas, and there was lots of young men, and the women were head to toe in the whole black gear. You could only see the eyes, and all the eyes looked fantastic, but they all looked identical. So you can just imagine if a whole load of them went into the shops, you know, easily, you know, husband, or you could easily pick up his wrong wife and take her out the hand to lead out the shop. Wait, he goes, ah! It's the wrong wife, because they look exactly the same. And I've even sat next to them, I've even sat in a restaurant in Malaysia where you have the young Muslim man decked head to toe in designer gear. He's got designer gear from his top of his head to the soles of his feet, and his wife looks exactly like every other woman in the restaurant, and she has to lift up her veil to eat food. And you're thinking, oh my God, you know, this, and that's based on a book which was released, what, maybe 1,000 years ago. Religion has completely and utterly kept the majority of people on this earth in this vice-like grip, and what a shame that we haven't yet grown out of religion. But of course, the reason why we don't do, as I've explained in another video, is because we're all scared to death of death. And so we want to keep on the right side of the person who will keep us happy in another place when we die. Anyway, that is today's video. There would have been an early one, but today I've worked on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, up at 5:30, driven for 10 hours. Yes, I got stuck doing, I was driving for 10 hours, loading for another hour, so I've worked for like 33 hours this week. And they even phoned me up this morning and says, can you come in today? No, I've actually got to do some other work. And tomorrow I'm going away to a place called Alnwick, which is in Northumberland. I'm going to go to Alnwick Castle, go to Bamborough Castle, Alnwick Castle, famous, where Harry Potter was filmed, and also the Blackadder series, well, the first season 1. Then going to Bamborough Castle, where a lot of, you know, Viking series were, you know, you see that in the background. Also going to Lindisfarne, which is famous because that's where the Vikings obviously rolled in and wrecked the place. And I think Saturday night going to see a group of musicians who tour called Feast of Fiddles, or Feast of Fiddlers. I think it's Fiddles, I can't remember. Feast of Fiddles, yes, and they're playing in somewhere in Alnwick. I think it's the Alnwick Playhouse. And in the Feast of Fiddlers, is it Fiddles? Where is it? No, that's the Fairport Convention tickets. In the Feast of Fiddlers, Feast of Fiddles, not my mouth. In the Feast of Fiddles place, it is in the Alnwick Playhouse. Two of the people, one of them is a guy called Chris Leslie, and he is actually in the current Fairport Convention lineup, so I've seen him once before. And the other guy, the drummer in Feast of Fiddles, is the guy who was the drummer for Fairport Convention when their original drummer got killed, sadly, in a motorway accident. And so yeah, he's going to be there as well, so quite looking forward to that. So anyway, so you won't be seeing me all weekends, and I bet you that it won't come. I bet you'll be crying. Anyway, that's me. So it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye to you, and it's goodbye to you. Have a great weekend. I'm off. Bye bye.